Good. There we go. It looks like we're live. So welcome everybody who is currently going to be joining en masse here for a second. We'll get a big wave. Sweet. Look at all that. That was awesome. Up to 48 the instant we went live. Sweet.
Nice.
They're all here to see you, Jim.
I don't know, man. You're on a pretty good schedule now. Every Wednesday at this time, people get used to it. I know I did.
I got to get this camera to stop. Okay, so just to let anyone know right off the bat, my camera has decided to just go totally rogue. It's an AI camera, and it has decided that it is going to just do what it wants. It's trying to center me in a weird way I don't understand. So if you notice my camera tends to veer off to the side or whatever, I'll try to keep adjusting it and I'll figure out for next time why. But we're, running into the time frame. So, well, welcome everybody. This is Jim the historian, and I've been wanting to speak with him for quite a while now in person, as we've had quite a few conversations through chatting on Substack and through posts and that sort of thing. So I wanted to get to know him a bit better and let you guys get to know him as well. So say hi to Jim, everybody.
Hey, glad to be here. Thanks for the invite.
Yeah, no problem. So you go by Jim the historian, because you essentially, I think you told me that you love history, but that's not what your profession actually is as of right now, right?
No, I out of school, I went to work on riverboats and did that for about 5 years and decided that was a dead end. Um, but I learned a lot about life in those 5 years, and I also became an avid reader during those 5 years. And you figure that's when most people are going to college. I then went to the equivalent of a night school, where I learned about computers while I was working. And then I just moved to Washington, D.C. It was kind of on a whim. And it was actually Manassas, Virginia, but it's outside D.C. It's the D.C. Beltway type mentality. And that was career wise, that was the best thing I ever did. Because I instantly got a job in IT. I was concerned about longevity because I came from Pittsburgh and it was during the Rust Belt years. So I
Ah,
was working in Pittsburgh for minimum wage after learning a computer skill. I went down to visit somebody in Virginia and I found out that I could be making almost twice that flipping steaks at the local steakhouse. I never went back. I was like, no, this is insane.
yeah.
um, I was on a riverboat and doing the morning routines, cleaning up, and I always have my newspaper with me. And I remember reading Washington, D.C. never goes through a recession because of the federal government. And I was like, oh, well, first chance I get, I'm going there. And when I came down
Yeah.
and saw the job opportunities, it was like, yeah, that's it. I'm staying. Flipped steaks for a few months and got a job in computers and never went back. So, yeah, I've worked in IT. Um, I worked with really mainframes for the first 15, 20 years. And then I got into the web. Um, and that's really been some really good career moves. With the mainframe, it was always stability, not much changed.
Yeah.
And that was during an era with a huge amount of change. When I first started, there was no World Wide Web. Um, so that stability was great because there was so much change in the IT world. And then when I got into the web, well, obviously going into the web's not a bad idea for anybody.
Yeah.
Even now, the only caveat is learn AI, right?
Yeah.
But so I got into IT. I've always been an avid book reader, and over the years, I became the guy in the office that would tell stories. Um, people, and I that taught me a lot of things, like how to read an audience. You know, how to structure a story so people would actually want to listen to it,
Yeah.
and how to pick the stories that nobody really heard of, or if they heard of it, to tell it in a way that was different. That was not like, hey, you've heard this before, so I'm going to tell it to you again. It's more like you've heard this 100 times, but did you know dot dot dot, and be able to
Yeah.
fill in those blanks. Um, I found that was a great way to learn how to do it. And so I've had blogs off and on for years. And learning how to change, both in my career, but also in writing, I found to be just one of those things you have to do, right?
Yeah.
Um, so that's about a bunch about me, and I've noticed you've changed recently. You've kind of said, "Hey, I'm not going to fight with the MAGA world. I'm going to write." You're going to focus more on comedy. Well, that's what I picked up on, comedy, but
Yeah.
some serious things as well. How'd you make that choice?
Well, so I'm still fighting MAGA in my mind, but instead of fighting them like on content related to, the Donald or the MAGA movement, I'm fighting them by giving people a recourse, a little bit of a break from the MAGA world, a little bit of break from the never ending, incessant, poor MAGA, poor Trump. Everybody's always picking on Trump and MAGA and stuff. And, allow people to have a moment to, see some animals that are cute and some, content that's funny and, give people an opportunity to get a breather in there instead of just constantly focusing on the negative aspects of politics and everything that's going on. So I'm still in my own way, I'm still fighting them, and I still have plans to fight them even more. So I want to start, being able to eventually I'd love to get to make enough money to be able to donate, money to people who are running against MAGA type opponents here in Idaho in areas where they have a chance to win and be able to contribute that way. And so, but it's been going pretty well. So
Mhm.
for since October, I was slowly going negative on overall subscribers. But since
Hmm.
I started doing the more comedy base and the animals and the kids videos and stuff like that, I've actually, for the first time since October, been going positive in overall subscribers. So
Good. Hey, that's good.
yeah,
I remember chatting with you, the idea of the full court press in sports. When you have
yeah,
a full court press, the real trick of the full court press is a lesser team is able to beat a better team. And that's because they force the better team to play in a different way than what they're used to.
right,
That is the idea of it. Now, it is easier to fail than to change. Period. That is human nature.
yeah,
And that is why the full court press works so often. Of course, if the better team says, "Hey, they're forcing us to change and we're going to do it," then the lesser team gets their ass kicked. I
yeah,
mean, it's not even close. But when it works, it's great.
yeah,
So
yeah, yeah.
that's what I thought of.
Yeah, I remember you telling me about that, and that's a good point. When you take people, that's kind of for a while there when I first started doing this, and I started doing it a long time ago on Twitter before I came over to Substack. When I first started fighting the sort of negative right wing, far right mentality here in Idaho, I realized that if you played on their chessboard, so to speak, then they were going to win because
Mhm.
they had the entire board rigged. But if you flipped their board upside down and made them play your game, then you had a better chance. And when I started enacting that and coming up with my own rules and my own ways of approaching these individuals, I am now blocked on most social media platforms by like 90% of Idaho politicians because they have me on a list of like instant block. So like they see me on a platform and they're like block, block, just immediately because I'm on that. This camera is driving me nuts, man. So they immediately block me. I'm on a list of incredibly uh, quote unquote dangerous individuals for the MAGA movement. And it started because I started asking them questions. And I swear to God,
Oh,
that's all it was. I would just ask them, so how does that actually benefit people in Idaho? How does that actually make sense for liberty and justice? And how is that freedom and things like that? And so it started enraging them. I started getting threats of violence from actual politicians because I would ask them these sorts of questions and they absolutely despised it. So I knew that I was onto something. But seems how, like I said, I got put on that list. So I'm blocked by them. I could no longer engage and fight them and build my own following based on my fight against them on
right,
Twitter because
right.
people couldn't see me fighting them anymore. So I knew I had to expand, and so that's where I started. I talked to you before this started, the show, Kenyon's Meridian, and the first individual from the far right that I invited on, he's a published author, but I knew he was full of shit. I knew that he was an actual moron who was just pretending he wasn't a moron. And so I invited him on the show, and I wasn't even mean. I wasn't anything. I just asked him questions, and you could tell by his blank stares that he was completely unprepared. He had no idea what he was talking about, and he was absolutely a poser. And so he ended up just falling off the board. He doesn't post anything online anymore. He doesn't write books anymore.
So you really
And that's
hurt
when I
this
knew
guy.
exposure was a good weapon. Huh?
I said, "You really hurt this guy."
Yeah, and I wasn't even mean. Like, the episode's still on YouTube, you could go find it. But yeah, I wasn't even mean to him. I just asked him questions, and over the period of the, hour and a half, 2 hours, I don't remember how long it was that we were talking, you could tell, like, by the look in his eyes that he was like, "Oh, you're an asshole." Like, you're like, "Why are you asking me these difficult questions?" And so,
So,
yeah.
that reminds me well, my mother, um, she's to the right. She's a little to the right, and I know I've got a number of years on you. I'm pushing 60 very soon. Um, my mother was a little to the right of the John Birch Society. You
Mhm.
might have to Google that one, but,
I will.
yeah, they are out there. My father was very liberal. Now, his sister, my Aunt Molly, she did some serious jail time for protesting against the government. When I was a teenager, it was the left wing that were nutcakes, and they're the ones that went to jail.
Yeah,
Um, and that really impacted me. It made me very much a centrist.
yeah.
It's like, hey, I've come to really admire what my aunt's done. I've also had a number of really conservative friends. They tend to last in my friendship circle if they're not nuts,
Yeah,
you know?
yeah,
Um, and so I can kind of relate to what you're saying because it sounds like you're not mimicking the left wing talking points. You're actually saying, "Hey, look, here are facts." And to me, that goes a long way. It's probably one reason why we hit it off talking.
yeah. I more than likely see, like, you saying that you're a centrist and stuff. That's what I consider myself, and it's more of a placeholder term more than anything for me. I try to explain to people because I don't feel like I am a Democrat. I don't feel like I'm a Republican. I'm definitely not far right. I'm definitely not far left. And so the
Yeah.
only conclusion I'm left to draw is I must be somewhere in the middle. So centrist is where that comes into place, which is where the name of the show, The Meridian, came from, is the middle, the
Oh,
median,
okay.
the meridian between the two sides. And
Okay.
so that's yeah, that's where that came from. And I get historically, I don't so much get in trouble with the left as often anymore, but I have historically gotten death threats and threats of violence from people on
Wow.
the right and the left because of my more centrist leaning viewpoints. And so because I do believe in a responsible, and the key word is responsible, right to bear arms. I do very much
Yeah.
support the freedom of speech.
Yeah.
Um, and so just saying that I believe in the right to bear arms has gotten me in trouble with several groups of people who do not believe that way. And so,
So not to cut you off,
yeah, you're good.
but what you said really had me thinking, and so with this live audience, obviously, I want people to read my work, but to give you an example of how I like to tell stories, thinking of the Second Amendment and thinking about originalism, you have to really accept, they like to play with words on the right and the left, on both extremes to say, "This is exactly what it means. This is what it says."
Mhm.
But a real study of American history, you have to accept that they rewrote those laws in the 1800s, 13, 14, 15 amendments.
Yeah.
And as part of that, you have to, from an originalist viewpoint, you have to look at what was behind those amendments. What were the debates? And one of those debates was very clear. The federal government is not going to be here to defend the rights of black people who we just fought a war to free from enslavement.
Yeah.
If the federal government's not there to do it, who is? They are. And how do they do that? They do that by arming themselves.
Yeah.
And that's what they did by and large. And so the Second Amendment really does mean you have the right to bear arms, and it can be against your own government when they are denying you your rights.
Yes.
Now, since the 1800s, and especially with the advent of World War I and World War II, with the expansion of the federal government,
Yeah.
it's become less radical. It's become, look, if the government is stealing your rights, you have the right to sue. You have the right to go to court and stand up for your rights and insist that the federal government or the local government is, you know, held to account. Now that
Yes.
doesn't that is not an argument that the Second Amendment is no longer useful, and it's
Right.
definitely not an argument for pick up a gun and shoot a cop. It's
Yeah.
not, right? But it does give some context to the Second Amendment, and it's one of those things, unless you listen to real constitutional historians that aren't writing on the Supreme Court, that it adds some real flavor to and depth to some of those arguments, and it makes it less as clear cut on the right and left. Yeah, so
Yeah.
that's one way that I like to tell stories. And hey, man, I kind of went off there. Please.
No, you're good. I was enjoying it. I was listening. Uh the cameraman, the camera's driving me nuts. It keeps moving every time like I go to talk. It's like so it's a good practice on trying to remain focused. That's for sure. So no, I completely agree with you. We now have an ability to sue a bloated federal government, which, like you said, did not really exist before the First and Second World Wars. We've kind of expanded the federal government's reach quite a bit since that time period, which is something I don't think a lot of people actually seem to take into account. There is something to be said about states having their own, ability to choose and decide, and it's very important that individuals be able to, bring lawsuits against their state or federal government in the case of a wrongdoing or a breach of civil rights. For instance, here in Idaho, there was a teacher right here in Meridian, actually, where I live, where it was a double work on the name of the podcast I first started, Kenyon Meridian. She was put on administrative warning, because she had a sign in her classroom that said everyone is welcome, because it was considered, far left propaganda, to indicate that everybody is welcome. There's no reason that there should be a sign that says everyone is welcome. So she refused to take it down. So the school district fired her, and immediately the school district right next door, the Ada County School District, hired her up, right? Well, now she's suing the Meridian School District and the state of Idaho on a federal level, in like the Supreme Court or whatever, because of a breach of, her duties as a teacher, which is to make all students feel welcome. And I completely agree with that. One part of me is like, oh, that's just, going to cost taxpayers money. But the other part is you have to hold them accountable. You have to. And that was an absolute unjustifiable action on the school district to fire her for having a sign that says everyone's welcome. Everyone should be welcome. And if that sign bothers you, then you're probably not a great person, quite honestly.
It also, when I see those arguments, it's a reflection of who holds political power, because they're not really thinking in a way that says, what if I'm the one that's enforcing that? Or what if I'm the one that's a victim of it? I'm not allowed in there because my views are too far right. And they don't view it as, hey, that's actually protecting me.
Yeah.
Um, yeah. So okay. So just thinking through. So okay. One of the first ways I found to tell non-controversial stories that really um, drew people in. Um,
Mhm.
I picked the story of the rape of Nanking. And you've heard of this?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Horrific event.
Yeah.
Roughly 250,000 people slaughtered, hand in
Yeah.
hand combat, and these were men and women and children that were not combats. Um, and this happened in China.
Mhm.
Um, it happened in an international, or no, it happened outside an international zone. The international zone was within the city, and within that international zone, the one man that was running all these nations, they had like consulates and businesses in this administrative zone. The leader, oh my gosh, I should have prepared for this one. Robbie, I think was his name. Um, he arranged to hide as many Chinese people as he could. I mean,
Yeah.
I believe it was well over 1,000. And he was rewarded by his government by going to a concentration camp because his boss was Adolf Hitler. So it's like, yeah, you're not with the program of how we're going to run things. Now, as Americans hear this, and it's somewhere between you're kidding and almost laughing. Like, how could a government do that?
Yeah.
Um, so that I found that was a great way to just lure people into the real depth of what history is, and it also kind of challenges some of the preconceptions of China.
Yeah.
Because people see what they see today. They don't
Yeah.
look back in history.
Right, yeah. China was bullied for a long time. Japan was, even though it was a smaller nation, Japan just ran through them for
Oh,
quite
yeah.
a big stretch of history and took as much as they wanted anytime they wanted it. And so now it's only been what, since really World War II and the end of World War II, that China has started to grow into this superpower that it is now. Beforehand, it was, a gigantic nation, a massive land rather, but it
Yes.
wasn't what it is right now by any
Yeah.
means. And so China is a very fascinating country. And I always grew up with the idea that you don't want to wake that sleeping dragon. God, it just keeps moving on me.
I was trying not to say anything this time because it was so obvious.
Yeah, I don't know why it keeps deciding to move. What is going on with you, camera? What is your problem right now? So
So, and I love telling the stories in history because they're so unexpected. And they even surprise me sometimes. I was watching the Super Bowl this weekend. Were you?
yeah, yeah, I did. I
Yeah.
did actually watch the Super Bowl.
Halftime show. Um, I did not really care if it was Kid Rock or the bunny guy. What's his name? I,
Bad Bunny.
yeah, Bad Bunny. My daughter loves. She stayed up on to watch him on Saturday Night Live. Um, Absolutely thinks he's great. He comes on within 30 seconds. I'm just flabbergasted because he's running through sugarcane fields. That was the first thing that caught my mind. And it's like, well, if you know anything about the history of the Caribbean, Puerto Rico, I was like, oh, wait, okay, I don't know who this guy is really. I couldn't name one of his songs. Um, and here I am instantly impressed that he understands context.
Yeah.
He understands, I mean, visually how to tell a story. And I've been like reading about the guy ever since. I was like, wow, this is incredible. Asked a friend who's from Puerto Rico originally. She's an American citizen, and she just went off on how much she just loves, and the rest of her family loves Bad Bunny. It was just really cool to see that connection with people, based on history. To me, it was like speaking my language instantly. So hey, and Bad Bunny is badass. LOL. Yes.
Yeah. Yeah, and she also mentioned, how about India? It's coming up in the world too, and that's true too. That's been spectacular to see because that's been something that is visually obvious just in like my lifetime, and in even my since my 20s. India has started to come up in the world and make a name for itself, and it started with them investing money they really didn't even have in essentially infrastructure and internet. They had a goal to get their entire country connected to high speed internet by a certain time period, and they reached that goal. And then now they're doing it to where it's the fiber internet. Now they want to connect the entire country to fiber internet to try to strengthen the nation as a whole, and it's worked. Just connecting its whole nation so that they can have quicker, trade routes and agreements between farmers, and the citizens are up to date on what's going on in the nation, has helped India tremendously come from being, on the verge of collapse to being almost, I mean, they are essentially a world power at this point, and it's really actually very cool to see. I've been very impressed with India the last couple of decades.
Okay, I have got to look this up because you really touched on something. The West versus the now Ferguson. Now Ferguson, he's an author, and he is to the right. He's not American, so some of his ideas are quite foreign to somebody on the left or right, and me until I started reading him and started to understand his viewpoint. But he wrote a book. It's got to be 15 years ago.
What's his name?
Civilizations.
Sorry to interrupt.
Civilizations.
No, what's
That's
his name?
Niall Ferguson. Niall Ferguson.
Yep. Okay, found him. I'm bringing this stuff up so I can look at it
Yeah.
later. The John Birch Society. Now Ferguson got
Uh,
it.
wow, not the way I wanted to come off, honestly, as you list
No, I
those
like having
2.
things to research, so I'm glad that
Yeah.
you're giving me new things. So thank you.
So I am not an expert in India. I know people from India. I work with people from India. Good relations you want to have with people from work, and I try to. But just thinking of that book, and it explains how 100 years ago America was had race riots. They were lynching people still. Now that's, I mean, whether you like Trump or not, whether you're a hardcore to the left or not, a lot of the problems we had 100 years ago no longer exist. And they don't exist for a reason. And that's because as we have developed our infrastructure, developed our education system, uh, world renowned education system, um, that has really changed the way citizens view each other. Um,
Yeah.
it's no mistake that the civil rights movement that was a success, that really ended um, Jim Crow, came after World War II, and that was because of the rise of media, the rise of education, and black people giving a ton of money because many of them went to go fight in World War II, and they came back with these paychecks and they invested it in things like the NAACP. Um, and that was an evolution. All those things had to happen, not necessarily in that order, and definitely not advocating for war. Um,
Right.
but the civilization grew thanks to its embrace of technology, communication, which happens over and over in history. Think of the Gutenberg Bible and things like that.
Yeah.
And then you apply that type of thought process, and as you were kind of hinting at, you look at China um, within our lifetimes, definitely within my lifetime. You look at India within my lifetime, and their societies have really changed, and for the better.
Yeah.
And how do you say that it's for the better? And that is, what is the lifespan? What is the quality of life? How many people live? I think there was one time, I might be showing my age. Do you live on more than $1 a day was like the baseline. You wouldn't believe the percentage of people in the world that live below that.
Yeah.
But today, I mean, it is just skyrocketed thanks to communications, and it's affected a lot of those countries like China,
Yeah.
like India. Japan was already pretty much a success well before World War II. Um, so
Yeah.
yeah,
Japan always finds a way to thrive, no matter if even when we cut off like their main like I don't know, way to seek honor, through war. We're like, no, no more war.
yeah,
And they still are like, all right, well, here comes, all these, technological advancements. Here comes
yeah.
the anime culture here, we're not giving up at all by any means. And they're still just an absolute world power, even though they have all these restrictions on their culture. They're amazing. Japan is really an amazing, amazing country. It truly is.
Yeah, yeah. Um, well, I did enjoy that Tom Cruise movie, the one about the Last Samurai. I thought that
Yeah.
was just so I had to do some reading about it, because I mean, you look at movies and they tell a specific story, right? And so sometimes you don't get an honest view of the culture. but I went back and did a lot of reading, and it was really fascinating the length they went in the movie to just show, hey, this is how the culture actually worked. This is how they viewed things, and I thought it was pretty well done. And
Yeah.
that's just one example of like looking back and saying, okay, what was that culture like then?
Yeah. Yeah, no, it's been it's fascinating if you go through Japanese culture. They have always been incredibly proud. They have a definite way of doing things that a lot of the, especially Western cultures, don't. You know, like societal norms are huge in Japan. It's almost considered worse than a crime, even if it's not technically a crime, to like disrupt societal norms. Um,
Mm.
for
Oh
instance, at
yeah,
the
yeah.
yeah, it's one of the reasons like cannabis weed has never really been a huge problem in Japan is because the smell alone offsets societal norms. It's considered rude, so people don't use it because, being rude is like almost worse than the crime of cannabis itself. And so it's interesting. You look at like their culture and the way they deal with certain things, and even if you don't end up getting in trouble for a crime, if you're just like a rude, obnoxious person who talks loud on their cell phone and stuff all the time, you're going to be shunned in that society.
So thinking through civilizations, and I'm going to link it to what you just said, but the civilizations, they have cycles too, and that's one of the things that has me concerned about America today. And it's not even just with Trump. I mean, there's things on the left that scare me. But thinking through how change comes about, and you were just talking about the smell of weed and how that disrupts the culture. And
Mhm,
I remember, and so I go to a ton of these book talks. I go to just historical society talks. I just find them so fascinating. There's this, there's a bookstore in DC called Politics and Prose, and that's great because it doesn't matter if you're on the left or right. You can get a spot, showing off your book and talking about it. And they're on the web.
that's
You can
cool.
go see a lot of the speakers. They are the bookstores, heavy, heavy percentage to the left. Uh, if you've heard of Pizzagate, it's like right next door. Um, so one of the talks I went to, um, and this was actually not their politics and prose. My memory's going. Don't get old if you can help it. This was actually at the Balch Library, which is closer to where I live. It's here in Loudoun County. If you read the Jim the Historian, you'll see a lot about Loudoun. I try to write about local stuff, but I went there one day and they were talking about some of the events in Mississippi and Alabama, and you'll remember the young girls murdered in their church,
Mhm.
and that was shortly after Birmingham. Was it the Birmingham bombing, church bombing? Yeah. Um, so they're murdered in their church, and this was shortly after the March on Washington, and people weren't sure about the after effects of the March on Washington. It was really when these young girls were murdered that it just became a sea change for legislation to really change things. At the Bulge, so anybody can pick up a history book, and I might have had something out of sequence there. That's not the point. The real point is at the Balch Library, I'm listening to these people talk, really fascinating. But it is the local historian that starts talking afterwards. And he's explaining how Martin Luther King and his group were having a lot of talks. They were pushing for, let's get out of Birmingham. Let's get out of Alabama. Let's get out of Mississippi. If we went to Virginia, the culture is much different. Now, Jim Crow was alive and well and the rule of the land. But in Virginia, it wasn't violence. It
Yeah.
was much more toned to what you were saying with the culture. It was like, no, 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 no. If you get out of line, you won't have a job. You don't have to worry about somebody bombing your house.
Yeah.
You'll end up moving because you can't find work. Um,
Right.
and the cultural impact was so much stronger in Virginia than it was. So even here in the United States, in different regions, I just find it so fascinating how important culture is. And
Yeah.
maybe it's because I grew up in Pittsburgh and moved to Virginia, that it's become so pronounced. I was still pretty young, around 20, when I came down here. And just seeing like overnight, oh my God, it's like a different country. the way people
Yeah.
think and speak and behave and what's expected. I was good at my job, so that helped, but there there were times it was
Well,
hard to
Pittsburgh
fit
is
in.
kinda known to be rowdy too, isn't it?
Ah, still
Everyone I've
now?
ever talked to who visits Pittsburgh is like, "That place is crazy, dude."
Probably.
So, I bet you that was a culture shock, but even like what you're saying, even, statewide here in Idaho, there's a bit of a difference between, cultural norms just from, like, one city to another. If you go from, central Idaho, uh, to northern Idaho, you're gonna get a little bit more wild in northern Idaho, but it's going to be with people that are very far right. And then you go from
Mm,
central Idaho where, it's all about manners. That's where I come from originally, is central Idaho. It's all about manners and, yes, sir, no, ma'am, sort of behavior and talk. Even if you're left or right, you're going to speak like that. And then you go to South Idaho, and it is more Southern Idaho, especially the capital, Boise. It's more liberal, and people are definitely outspoken against, the right wing politics and stuff like that. So even just within the state, you have this huge change and shift just from, central Idaho to northern Idaho to southern Idaho. There's a lot of differences in the way people, are allowed or expected to behave. So it's very fascinating the way that we
yeah,
self-regulate
yeah.
as cultures.
Yeah, and just within Virginia. I live in Northern Virginia. I am so not to disclose too much personal information on the web, but I am the father of a multiracial family. We live in Northern Virginia, and when we go to Southern Virginia, which we do, we have friends, we travel. Um, it is different. There is more of a, hey, look at them. I can honestly say in Northern Virginia, people don't give a damn
Yeah.
that I'm the father of a multiracial family. It's not even that they see it all the time; it's just accepted, which is very cool. Um,
Yeah.
but when we go somewhere else, we always have to at least acknowledge it. Now we live here, right? So it's not like it's a danger. It's just we have to be ready for that different culture.
Right.
You know.
Yeah.
So thinking of Idaho, I didn't realize that they also had different cultures. Who was that? There was a famous author that retired in Idaho and killed himself there.
Oh,
Um,
wasn't that God dang it, Hemingway just came to my mind, but I don't think it was
yes, I
him.
think it was
Was it?
Hemingway. Yeah, I
Was
think
it?
I
Yeah.
think so. Yeah, he did that in Central Idaho, didn't he?
Yeah, you can go visit his house, I believe. Uh
Ah,
yeah, yeah, he did. He killed himself in Ketchum, Idaho. Yeah. So you can go visit his house in Ketchum.
now was he
And
from there?
I don't think he was originally, no.
Hmm.
I think he did move here when he started having like mental health issues and stuff, not,
Uh,
necessarily calling them that back then, and
yeah,
thought that, the peace and quiet would help him. No, that's not a great idea. When you're having some mental health issues, sometimes a little bit of peace and quiet can do you some good, but oftentimes you need more socializing, in my opinion. That's just my opinion, not a professional, not an expert, not
yeah,
offering medical advice. So,
yeah.
but yeah,
Yeah.
he did end up getting depressed and ended up killing himself. So, but yeah, I do believe you can go tour or visit where his house was. Don't quote me on
Mhm.
that though. I believe I've heard that. I myself have never gone. So,
Mhm. Yeah, okay. So I see we've already gone. I can't believe it's 42 minutes.
yeah,
um,
it goes by quick.
so let's see. What are things I definitely wanted to get across without being rude and
Oh, you're
sucking
good.
up all the time? Um, so one of the things I've always prided myself in, I've been doing this, since the 80s, right? Reading a lot, and I have always loved how stories interconnect, right?
Yeah.
And the very first post I did here on Substack, I thought was just a great example. And it was talking about a community here in Virginia. There's Fairfax County, it's just outside the Beltway. Um, but back in the Civil War, the northern part of it were many Black communities. And those Black communities relied on Washington, D.C. for their livelihood because they were partially enslaved, but there were a sizable number that were freed. and living in Virginia, even though it was illegal to live in Virginia as a black person that wasn't enslaved. Um, in that
That's so
dynamic,
crazy.
it
That's so
isn't it
weird to
though?
me. It's so weird to me.
Imagine what people were going to think 150 years from today on how people lived. Um,
Yeah, I wonder
yes.
that. But yeah, anyways, so sorry for interrupting.
Oh no, no. Um, the thing that I found so fascinating was reading this in a book, but then realizing that I had been to this place. I had been to this very small, I'll call it a monument, but it was really a tiny little kids park. And it was the remnants of a small fort that was built. I forget what they called them. Um, and there was a little plaque explaining it. And so I did some more research, and then I found out that these little forts existed all across Northern Virginia and within DC. In the song, the Battle Hymn of the Republic was inspired by the author standing there. I forget what her name is. It's in the post though. It's
Yeah,
her standing in Washington D.C. and she's looking at all these soldiers around her, you know, and then she's looking into the distance and she's seeing the campfires of all these tiny little forts there to defend Washington D.C. from invading forces. And that little fortress was just one example of them. And unlike many of them, this actually linked to a part of Virginia not many people know about. And so I just thought that was like a really cool story that brought so many things together that I thought would kind of not tell the standard story, not the standard story of um, living in Virginia at that time, not tell the story of, or to tell the story of being black living there at that time.
yeah,
Um, but also, how were the union's officers fighting at that time? How were their views? And seeing them so empowered by fighting for the rights guaranteed in the first, 10 amendments, that we do have the right to association. We do have the right to religion. We do have the right to defend ourselves. And that's what a lot of them believed in. And I just find
yeah,
those stories so, well, first off, interesting, but also inspiring.
yeah,
When you're seeing what the Battle Hymn of the Republic was really about, I was like, wow, this is so fascinating.
yeah,
And here's people that lived it.
yeah. Yeah, it is, those sorts of examples are, really good, and it kinda ties back to what you were saying earlier when you mentioned, how, there's, like, a necessity almost to struggle sometimes, because it helps, create innovation and change within a nation, the 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 things that people saw during World War II and the absolute hate from, Hitler and the Nazis helped create a mentality in people where they're like, whoa, 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 we don't want this all over the world. So let's go ahead and fight to, get civil rights for everybody, equality for all, and it kind of helped us grow as a world. And so, people like that, even though it's horrible that it's true, are almost necessary because they do help you realize the weaknesses in a culture or in the world in general. And oftentimes it boils back down to hate, blind, unnecessary hate and resentment. There was no reason to hate other humans because of the, melanin in their skin. None whatsoever. None. Zero reason. But we spent
Yeah.
thousands of years fighting with each other over essentially just the way our skin color was, or the way we're born in one nation instead of another, or one tribe instead of another. And I'd like to think we've gotten better. But then it's almost like it's like two steps forward sometimes, and then one step backwards. And then we've got to recoup and figure out what went wrong.
So so let's go with that because I think I've always liked the phrase history doesn't repeat itself, but it sure as hell does rhyme.
Right. Yeah.
And just thinking of World War One versus World War Two. Um, World War One, we didn't need as many people as we did in World War Two. That's one of the reasons why African Americans weren't invited to enlist as much.
Yeah.
Um, it's a reason why African Americans were invited to enlist in the Revolutionary War. Oh, I've got a blog about that as well. Um, In the aftermath of World War One, just showing, it does rhyme. There was an upsurge of people demanding their rights. They did go to Europe. They did fight. They did come back with these new ideas.
Yep.
And the American response was slaughter. It's pretty much known as, well, it's not pretty much, it is known as the summer. Oh my gosh, I'm blanking on it. Summer of Rage, Red Summer of all these race riots across the United States. And many of them were African Americans not behaving in the way they were expected, and
Yeah.
the havoc that it brought. But it was also a pattern that was repeated after World War II, but with a much stronger enforcement. We needed African Americans in World War II much more than we did in World War One. That did give them more money. That gave them more power, more representation.
Yeah.
And
Well, and they got to
Mhm,
serve right next to, got to, I don't and we got, to serve together, as different, cultures and people. So,
mhm.
white people, had to rely on a black brother, in the military to have their back. And through that reliance, codependency almost, they started to learn, oh, wait, this individual really isn't much different than I am, you know?
Oh, wait, do I have it right back there? So, Half American was a book that about the Black communities, during World War II, and it's so fascinating reading it because that was top of mind
Yeah.
in America, how the, races got along during World War II. The, at the same time that book came out, maybe a year or 2 before it, I actually ran across a government study of, "Hey, how are the races doing now that everybody's enlisted and they're fighting side by side? How are things actually going, and how can we improve things?" Which I have never run across anything during World War One talking about that.
Yeah.
Um, and also thinking of different viewpoints. And one of the things I always try to bring up when I write is that it is literally 2 communities running in parallel, and it is not one community over another. That's kind of, if we were junkies, we would call that stinking thinking, because that's really placing a value on people, and that just leads you in the wrong direction. And that's one things when I tell the story about, race in World War II is to bring up, um, they were really fighting for, the expected equality from the beginning. There's a thing called the double V, which is they expected victory at home and they expected victory overseas. That's what they were fighting for.
Yeah.
And America won because of the African Americans enlisted. Now there is a lot of talk, and rightfully so, about how they were relegated. They were not expected to fight in battle. They were, more and more of them were left behind. They were left to work in transportation. There's now really good movie about how a very experienced and competent group of women was hired to sort the mail, and it seems demeaning, but it was actually a monumental task that they tackled. But the best example is Russia at the beginning when they were attacking Ukraine. I don't know if you remember, and if I would have planned ahead well enough, I would have had a clip for you. But there's literally a line of tanks in the middle of Ukraine with these Russian soldiers just standing there. And it's like, well, wait a minute. Okay, nobody told us what to do. We're blocked. What do we do now that we're blocked? That's a lack of infrastructure. That's a lack of transportation. I forget the technical name for it. That is what a lot of African Americans were enrolled to do in World War II. And strategists know that's what wins battles,
Yeah.
right? And so it is acknowledging that, blacks were, um, what's the right word for it? They were denied the chance for so many positions in World War II. But thinking of it as a parallel community, you've got to recognize what that group of individuals was able to do. They literally enabled us to win World War II.
Yeah.
You take away that very important piece, we didn't have the manpower to do it.
Well, yeah, and up until, this is something that's insane to me as well, is, up until even, God, it was after World War II. Native Americans were not considered Americans. That's insane. Like, people, when you first tell them that, don't believe you at first. They're like, "There's no way," but they weren't. They weren't given the credit of being Americans. They weren't allowed to vote in elections as Americans. There was a lot of implications. Basically, they were, restrained to not leaving their reservations, and very much encouraged to stay there simply because they were treated as, an illegal foreign immigrant if they were to try to leave the reservation and, travel throughout the United States. So, and it was after World War II before, I do believe, before a lot of Native American tribes started to get recognized as, yes, okay, though they are their own sovereign nations on these reservations, they are still American people. And it's crazy to see, just like with black communities that were considered, still a type of other, even though they were us. They were treated as if they were, they were this outside people, even though we were all, as a nation, if there was a recession, we were all going to struggle. If there was good, all of a sudden economic growth, we were all going to gain, disproportionately, but it was
Okay.
going to happen,
Yeah. The history of the nadir, is kinda hinting at that. Well, not hinting, that is that. Um, and so I was laughing when you started bringing this up because obviously you don't know, but you're hitting really close to home. Well, we live in Virginia. We are the home of the one drop rule. We invented it, and we invented it because of Native Americans, because of slavery being so prominent here. And it was shortly after World War One, with the rise of, after Red Summer, you had the rise of the Klan. Well, before Red Summer, you had the rise of the Klan. Um, and I think it was 1924 when they actually encoded it. Our family, my my family growing up, we never would have passed the one drop rule. Now we're 100% white. I mean, when I say 100%, I grew up identifying white. We are white. Period. Um, but I've always known the history of our family, and living here in Virginia, being mixed race, I have literally seen exactly what you're talking about. That there is a division between the Native Americans, the white people, black people, and how they have lived. Oh gosh, what is it? Loving, the story of that puts it all together, because of that family. And I am really forgetting her name. Again, something, if I would knew I was gonna talk about this, I would have studied it, but, she's part Native American and she's part Black, and that was her history, and so that really got into the case. So yes, we're surrounded by that history all the time,
Yeah.
and directly without going into personal history within my direct family, but yeah, really close to home with those statements.
Yeah, I grew up technically on the Nez Perce Indian Reservation, but I didn't
Oh,
move to where the Nez Perce natives, lived until closer to high school.
mhm,
And so, the community I grew up in, a little town called Elk City, it is,
okay,
I
okay.
think there was one person in the entire town that wasn't white. So, it was, the discriminations were based on completely different things other than ethnicity. Uh,
Okay,
it
so I was
was,
saying we were very similar, but now I can actually see the history that is quite different because you had much more of the reservation mentality as you go out west, Oklahoma, for instance,
yeah.
that doesn't really exist in the same way here in Virginia, and that's
Yeah.
just due to history of when.
Yeah. It was interesting, when I first, got there, immediately noticed that the sense of community amongst, natives was much stronger than the sense of community I grew up with. Where I grew up, it was incredibly cutthroat. Everybody called each other, friend to their face, but, talk shit behind their backs. And, it was, everybody was like, you don't narc, but everybody was a narc, everybody would call the police on everybody else if they were pissed off. It was a very poor community, and both literally and, spiritually speaking. And so that was my first, when I first started, making friends with and hanging out with, Nez Perce Indians. They taught me that there is a possibility to have a real actual community where you do have each other's back. And so that was incredibly interesting to me. And I'm still friends with the people I went to high school with, and I still reach out and ask their opinions on certain topics. Like I asked my friend Nielsen, who's a native,
Mm.
his opinion on the change from the Redskins to the Commanders of the NFL team. And so I get some surprising answers sometimes, things I wouldn't have thought, but that's the reason I ask, is because if I just
Yes.
assume,
Yeah.
then I make an ass out of you and me. But so
So, y I still subscribe to the Washington Post, just proving I'm not purely a liberal. And just today, there was an article about a woman, she's clearly to the left, and she sits down at a MAGA table. I don't remember the exact situation, but she sits down with a group of MAGA, clearly endorsing Trump, and she was surprised. The topic matter were things she could agree with. It's like, okay, this isn't like listening to Donald Trump. They've got real concerns that aren't represented by what's in the news tonight,
yeah,
that aren't represented by what you read in the left or right wing Substack articles.
yeah,
These are like real situations with real people, and not talking to the other side or not being in the center and reaching out. You just don't see that. You don't
right,
really relate to those people, and that's very much true of studying history. And a lot
yes.
of the podcasts or a lot of the posts I try to do, I really try to. Oh, I hear music. Are we done?
Oh, yeah, it's the clock.
Oh,
It's just a reminder, but we're good for right now. So
oh, okay.
continue what you were saying.
Yeah. So one of my favorite stories, and it's important to know that I was telling this to some coworkers and friends with them, multi ethnic, national. Um, and I was telling the story of the Tulsa race riot. Now, this was in the 90s before it was common knowledge what it was, and early 90s. And it's a horrific story. Very quick recap. White people riot. They drive the black people out of their homes, 34 blocks roughly. Um, so a young black woman that I worked with, no, I don't want to say her name, just not that she would have watched this, but you know,
Yeah.
wouldn't want to offend anybody. But she instantly brought up Rosewood. She goes, "Okay, this reminds me of Rosewood." And I had said to her, "No, this isn't like Rosewood at all. Those people weren't going anywhere." And the reaction, I mean, she just got quiet. And it was later she came to me and she said, "That was one of the dumbest things I've ever heard somebody say." You know, and it was humiliating, and I really had to listen to what she was saying, and I was looking at it from an analytical viewpoint, but and I was not looking at it from the community viewpoint. What was that community going through after that? During that? And that's where the real connection was, the people on the ground living it, in both, Rosewood and Tulsa. Um, They really had so much in common, and it was really just showing my limitation of being able to analyze people. It's like I could read
Yeah.
all the history books in the world. Sure as heck wasn't teaching me how to relate to communities, how to relate to people on a one-to-one basis. She became a great
Yeah.
friend, um, probably because I was smart enough to listen to her, you know?
Yeah, that's been the little stint of college I have done. I got the opportunity to go to the multicultural room. It's a place where people from different cultures all around the world meet up at Boise State University, and they try to just have discussions, just conversations, or they play games, board games or whatever, and it was through that for the first time in my life that I really started to grasp the concept. Okay, we're not all that different. We're really not. Like, individuals from the Middle East who, became my friends later. And I learned a great deal from them. I realized, well, this person has the same kind of, hopes and dreams that I do. They want to
Yeah.
get smarter. They want to get stronger as an individual. They want to do better with their life. They want to go back. They want to make their community proud. They want to protect their families, and they want to feel a sense of love and, a community. And I started realizing, okay, wait, that's fucking everyone. There is when you like, if you sum it up like in the terms like that, it's everyone across the world has that kind of same basic, you know, uh, uh, idea, or hopes or dreams for themselves and their family and their friends. Is you know they do want to feel belong. They do want to love. They do want to do well with their life. They do want to get better. They do want to improve. And the only thing that's gone wrong with a lot of these communities doing that is they've been held back by, the white federal government for times, by being given syphilis and being tested to see what the, effects of syphilis were, and, the race riots, and, a whole half of
Yeah.
our nation fighting another half of our nation because, we were like, okay, wait a second. These individuals should probably not be slaves because they're fucking people. you know?
So so if my sister so thinking through of, relating to things in ways that we're not familiar with. Now we're in different parts of the country, that matters. We're both white men, that matters. Um, and my sister's not here, because she would instantly jump in and talk about how I don't relate to things from a woman's point of view very often. Now
Right.
she has a degree in women's study, so um, she is very well educated on the subject. Um, and always fascinating to listen to. But the Tulsa race riot, I actually joined. So I wanted to write about this, and we're going back 20 years. I joined a writers group, and I thought it was really fascinating. Ahem. Are you sure your sister's not here? So not well informed, is me. Uh, and so I joined this writers group, and it's a mixture of people, but truthfully, I'm probably the oldest person in the room, and I'm around 40 at the time. And so people are engaging me, and I submitted a piece for people to review. Well, it's primarily fiction. Not many people have joined writing nonfiction, and I was writing about nonfiction. I was writing about the Tulsa race riot, and the young, I think she was the youngest in the room, actually very smart, and she came in very well organized and determined to talk about her work. And they got to me, and she pretty much announced, I didn't even bother reading it. Like, this is not my thing, whatever. You're not really going with the flow here.
Yeah.
Um, and some of the people engaged me, and they started talking about what happened in the Tulsa race. Right, I remember being surprised that I had to explain midway through the conversation that the black people were not rioting; it was the
Yeah.
white people rioting.
Mhm.
Um, and they were talking through, well, how do you write this? How do you present this to get these facts across, but also making an interesting story at the same time? And so they're quizzing me, what happened here? What happened there? And blah, 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 blah. And they were talking about events. What happened during the day? What happened leading up to this? What was happening in the community? And I had answers to all this because I had done a ton of research. And so one of the things that I bring up is the prom. It was the black community was having the prom that night. And it is even then, it was on the internet, interviews with survivors that
Yeah.
experienced this, that went through the prom thing and so I knew all this. It's not like it was foreign to me. I knew all this. The
Yeah.
youngest woman in the room, she's like almost standing and she's almost in tears. She's like, "How do you not see this? Where do you begin the story? It's prom night. How do you not know this? How do you
Yeah.
not see that this is where you begin?" And I'm sure my sister would tell me, oh, and she's here, that yeah, that is just one of those blind sides that I can have when I study, is not looking at it from different communities. Um,
Yeah.
in any way, sense, or form. And now I tended to get very so that was actually a growing spurt for me on how to write and how to communicate going through that. It's been a number of years, but it was actually kind of fascinating.
Yeah. Well, that's kind of where I'm at too. It's why I'm doing these lives, is to get other people's perspectives, to, be able to learn how other people think and how other people view the world, and
Yeah.
be able to hopefully grab a little bit of their knowledge and wisdom and hold on to it for myself. And so I hope to, like I've said several times over the last few weeks, I hope to broaden that horizon and reach out to more individuals from different cultures and stuff. And if I could eventually have, one person from every, country on earth interview all of them before I die, that would be spectacular. I would love that. Like what could we learn? It's not that many countries. There aren't actually that many countries on earth. That's only a few years worth of episodes. And so I don't know. I really like people who are willing to and actually want to see the perspective through the viewpoint of others, because it shows that they're willing to like grow and learn and do better with their lives than an individual who only sees things through the perspective of themselves and their own family and their own little communities. And uh although I do see that as being essential as well, you have to see how the world affects your community and your people. You also need to see how you affect the world and other
Oh,
communities.
yeah. Oh, yeah. Um, yeah. I always be try to be cognizant of the groups I'm in. Um, for family, for the types of study I take up, and the way I interact with people, it can be humbling.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it
Yeah,
really
it
can.
can be humbling. I oftentimes, I don't let myself anymore think that and I even if I am or am not, it doesn't matter. I don't let myself think I'm an intelligent person. I always try to tell myself I still have a long ways to go, because I feel that since I started taking on that mentality, I've been able to actually learn more and grow more. So, um,
I think,
yeah, it's
Thomas Friedman wrote a book, The World is Flat, that talks about how we have to be constant learners. We've got
yeah,
to constantly relearn things. I thought that was great. I listened to this snippet from Michael Stipe, lead singer of REM, old '90s band. Um, and he was talking about, and I really related to this both in my IT training, but also in reading, that you enter the circle at the top, and you enter the circle as a novice. You don't really know much. A scale of 1 to 5, you know, 1 is being a novice, 5 being a master. Another word for novice, you're starting to learn, and you kind of know you're starting to learn. When you get to 2, it's like, hey, okay, you've learned a bunch. You think you know a lot more than you do because you haven't, because your depth of knowledge is pretty shallow, right?
yeah,
Um, I think the technical term for that is moron.
yeah,
Um, yeah, because you start saying things that make no sense, right?
yeah,
Um, and then 5 or 3 is, you're actually competent. You're not great, but you're competent. 4 is you're getting better, and 5 is really you're master of it. And if you really want to grow, you've got to accept being a novice again, and not everybody can do that.
yeah,
You've got to say, okay, I've got to walk into this group, maybe a different race, a different class, a different gender, um, and accept that you are no longer you're the master over here, but you're definitely not the master over in this new space. And how do you navigate
exactly.
that? I'm kind of
Yep,
going through that now at work with AI. It's like, okay, I'm kind of the master of this one thing, and that's going to change drastically. And how do I get ahead of that? And it's the third time in my career I've done this. I say drastically done this, you know?
yeah. Well, that reminds me of the old quote, a lot of people have heard, "A jack of all trades." People call individuals that who tend to have a wide variety of, skills. And the full quote is, "A jack of all trades is a master of none, but oftentimes better than a master of one." And I take that to mean that if you're a jack of all trades, it means that you continue to always know that there's more to learn. There's something else for
Yeah.
you around the horizon, or over the horizon, and there's something else that you can gain as an individual from, once again, like you're saying, becoming the novice in a group. To where if you're only ever a master of this one mindset, then that's it. You're limited to that one skill, or that
Yeah.
one, way of thinking, and you're never going to grow outside of it. And so, I like being considered, or especially when I did construction, I liked being considered a jack of all trades. I have done
Mm.
everything that there is to build a house, from, the concrete work, foundation, all the way up to roofing. And, I enjoyed that because it kept me growing in the construction field and learning. And so, but now I have to try to do that with learning and writing and seeing the world through other people's perspectives, and that's a little bit. It's not less or more difficult, but it's just different. So
Yeah. So working in IT, they call that a T-shaped. They like everybody to be T-shaped. They're very deep on one thing, but they want them to have a good knowledge of all these other things. Not deep, but good enough that they can kind of fit in multiple ways. You
that
know?
makes sense to me. T-shaped, yeah, that makes
Yeah.
sense. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Um, yeah. Okay. All right.
All
So,
right. Well,
yeah.
did you have anything you wanted to tell people before we rounded this off? We've gone over an hour a little, which is perfectly fine. It's been a really good conversation. I have enjoyed this very much, as I
Oh,
figured I
good.
would. Our
Yeah.
conversations in chat have all been great, so I figured this would be amazing, and I wasn't wrong. So, uh,
Yeah, well, first I'll say if I've offended anybody, sorry. It's not the first time, and apologies actually do matter. Because I've found that I have a tendency getting involved in stories to be blindsided. So
yeah,
if anybody wants to educate me on something that another viewpoint I should see, I will say I'm open. And that's a great way to learn. So, Jim the historian, just look me up, tell me off,
yeah.
that's fine. Or give me an opinion. Also, hey, try out my stuff and give me advice.
Yeah,
Um,
everybody who's still listening, everybody who's here, go subscribe to Jim. Follow him and make sure you pay attention to his work. It's amazing. He's an amazing guy, very intelligent, as you guys have been able to tell through this meeting. He's,
hey, thanks
I
for the
think he's
kind
a good
words.
person, and so please go subscribe to him and give him some of your time and energy.
And I got to say, so you're kind of the organizer, and I've seen that before. The way you do things, that you kind of pull people in. And I like the way you talk to people, and it's kind of been just cool to actually talk to you. After chatting with you, it is different.
Yeah.
Actually talking and getting to know people. So yeah, thanks a
Yeah,
lot.
no, no problem. Thank you for coming on. I'm very glad to have had you. I will, like I
Yeah, same.
said, if you want to come on again in the future, I'll schedule you for, a little ways out after I got a list of people still scheduled, and I'll
Yeah,
get you
yeah,
somewhere in there. And yeah, I'd love to have you on again, and we can maybe next time. Now that we have a better idea of each other's style and everything, we can have a focused topic to draw people in or whatever.
excellent. Yeah, yeah. That'll
Yeah.
that'll make me feel a little more comfortable. I'm a planner, so excellent. Nice to actually talk to you, and yeah,
Yeah.
I hope people enjoyed the talk. Take care.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. Have a good day. Bye,
You too.
everybody.
Bye.